because disruption can start skewing the game back in your favor towards the end. So actually, sometimes the faster player ends up losing because they get too far ahead, Roxanne disrupted, and can't come back.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting which way this goes. Both players, of course, will have to have that first decision. Whoever wins the coin flip to whether to go first or second, you know, there's an opportunity for Alberto, if going second, can start charging into the lost zone as soon as possible with something like Abyss Seeking, with that Giratina V as well, as we do see Alberto's fantastic finishes in recent times.
Yeah, I mean, regular day twos, those kinds of players, they're just opting for those day two players, getting loads of points, but now they're going to be thinking about getting that big regional win to try and get that auto invite to Worlds.
Yeah, Hermione as well. We did get a chance to see them in the finals at Bochum. And then, you know, consistently finishing in day twos as well. This time, of course, piloting that Gudra. I think he may have piloted the Gudra previously in another tournament as well, so is used to playing this deck and playing that card.
Is it Haitalati? Haitalati? Could be.
Good effort.
So let us know in chat if you know how it's pronounced, because this is one of the challenges as English speakers. We see these surnames from other countries. I wish I could just pronounce them like that. I mean, Mateus, we just had, Lashkiwish, something like that. It's hard. They're hard to pronounce when you're not used to it. So let us know in the chat if you know what's going on there. But we'll be getting into this game shortly. As you can see, all just setting up here. Should be a good match. It could go either way. A lot of these kind of matchups depend on those early turns. So definitely check out turn 1, 2, and 3 and see where it's going.
Yeah, I'm keeping a keen eye on who's going to win that coin flip, just to see who will be going first and who will be going second, as we do see the presentation of his deck ready for the cut as both players progress. So much to look forward to. Such an exciting moment here. Players setting up, checking their hands. Will we have a great start from both sides? I'm looking forward to a good game.
Yeah, I mean, Lost Tina was a deck that didn't feature in the top 6 decks of day 1 meta share, but has done very well to make it into the day 2 meta share. So it's converted wonderfully. I think it's 10% of day 2 even. So looking like a strong deck to be playing into the field well. I guess one of its weaker matchups, Lugia, hasn't been doing as well. So that colorless Lugia fallen off a little bit after its success last weekend.
Yeah, and what's generally been considered with Lost Box Giratina type decks is the fact that it tends to take 50-50 matchups with a lot of the formats. So it comes down to being able to reward a bit of skill by playing the actual deck itself. Does have 1 or 2 unfavorable matchups, does have 1 or 2 slightly more favorable ones, but generally can sort of tussle with a lot of the meta as it currently stands. Gudra is having a bit of a resurgence. I think you might have mentioned yesterday that it's had some success on online sort of different events or sort of online play. And now we're seeing it sort of start to convert itself into sort of real life.
And that was an Arceus Gudra, so completely different style. And I think it's always one of those decks that could be in the meta, but a lot of people don't have the patience for Gudra. We saw it have a bit of a resurgence last season when Stefan Ivanov popularized it again with the Lost Box Giratina. And I think it's always at its best when it's one of the least expected decks in the format, because many people don't know how to play around that rolling iron.
Yeah, and here we go, the fist bump kicking us off for our round 11 of our day 2. Sorry, just got quickly caught up by that Swiss round head on there. But yep, the fist bump activating it. Nothing too crazy in the prizes that we saw. 1 Giratina V-Star, 1 Gudra V-Star. Only slight problematic thing for Alberto Conti is that the Radiant Greninja there, which is a very useful card to have to be able to continue that consistency of drawing cards throughout the deck, and he won't have access to that immediately.
Yeah, I mean, both sides would love to see a Greninja be available, force the Manaphy down, and I think that's probably the biggest factor, I would say. From what I can see in Alberto's list, it doesn't seem like there's a Manaphy.
Yeah, it's something that a lot of Lost Tina players have begun to maybe forego in a lot of matchups. Both decks that we're seeing and being piloted both by Alberto and Hermione have the capability to use Radiant Greninja, to use that Moonlight Shuriken to take out 2 smaller HP Pokemon. So let's see if that is an option here for Hermione to take advantage of something like the Manaphy not being available.
Yeah, a lot of similarities in both the lists. I think looking to have that disruption endgame with a Roxanne, looking to try and be as consistent with that early lost count climb. I think there's a few more options when it comes to the Gudra list just because they've got some poker gear and a lost vacuum. So it should hopefully increase the chances of a Colress, and you can maybe accelerate a bit with the lost vacuum. But then the other side, you've got the Abyss Seeking, which can be used early on to accelerate too. So neither of them are going to be racing to that 10 as quickly as you might see with the Turbo Lost Box, but we should see them be able to get there in a few turns.
Yeah, already having the Battle VIP pass from Alberto into the switch cart for the Comfy for the first flower selecting of our round 11. There are a couple of awkward decisions. Hand isn't too great. We do see one of the Path to the Peak, which I think could come in to some fantastic effect as well. That's one way to limit that potential Moisture Star, V-Star ability on Hermione's side.
There's 4 of them in the list. I think that's the highest count of Path I've seen in a Tina list. Sometimes 3, sometimes 2, but 4 is on the higher end. So recognizing that Path was good into the field, and that's why Alberto's done so well, I'm sure Path to the Peak won't be as relevant in this matchup, but it's always a good card to put down to slow down that concealed cards, maybe block off a Moisture Star later on.
And we do see a couple of unique cards. I think Hermione just actually top-decked the Zamazenta as another additional attacker as well, as he does kick things off with a Chorus Experiment. Does have access to that Radiant Greninja straight from the top 5 that we see. Of course, 2 going to the Lost Zone, 3 going into the hand. A number of options available there.
So these decisions can be key at this stage. If you put anything too important in that Lost Zone, could come back to bite you later on. Nothing in that Colress that looked too scary, but it's just resources that, should they come up later on in a flower selecting or 2, could start making the decisions tougher. But just an energy and a switch out, which there are plenty of in the deck, will start to reduce those options. But at this stage, everything else far too important.
Yeah, it looked like it was the Radiant Greninja with 2 energy cards, that Psychic and the Jet, going into the hand. We do see the concealed cards here to draw 2. Doesn't yet have access to a Comfey, it looks like. Does have access to an Artisan, so we'll be able to start kicking things off via that means, potentially getting into 3 in the Lost Zone, maybe trying to activate that Cramorant in the active spot to spit instantly early.
With these kinds of matchups, where you got the big attacker in a Lost Box, they tend to be quite finicky. They're quite slow at the start. You don't need to rush, as we mentioned before. The disruption's a big factor, especially on Alberto's list. 2 Iono, 2 Roxanne, 4 Path. It's very much leaning into that comeback potential of the deck, where the Gudra wants to get set up early and start rolling iron as soon as possible. So I think it's definitely more in Hermione's favor to try and rush here. So you're going to want to try and get a high loss count as soon as possible, get a Mirage Gate online, and activate that Gudra.
Yeah, really trying to find out where those Battle VIP passes, because he will need multiple Pokemon down to just kind of get going at his current moment in time, as he just double checks what has been prized. Looking over just very quickly at Alberto's board, I mean, double Comfey and double Tina already kind of just starting the right setup to kind of be able to deal with whatever Hermione could throw at him.
And of course, you speak about rolling iron, but we've got escape rope boss combos that can get around that. So just because it's in the active and having that combination, there's no escape ropes. That's interesting.
Maybe one of those cards he's decided to forego for the additional path counts, just activating the sort of the full 4 switch cards to try and prevent the number of Turbo Lost Box.
Yeah, you just always assume any kind of Lost Box would have an escape rope in it, but with that disruption package you mentioned, the Iono, Roxanne, 2 of each, and the Path, you have to start making some sacrifices. So quite a low switch count number for Alberto. So I guess leaning into that Abyss Seeking a bit more.
Yeah, it's a fantastic attack to kind of help you burst up towards the potential of 7, of course, and then 10 as the different sort of thresholds that you need to reach for the lost count, as we do see the Comfey come down as well. But just getting to that stage and then just playing that kind of disruption with the 4 Path to the Peak and the Ionos, and then once you start losing a few prizes into the Roxannes, maybe that's how Alberto Conte is currently unbeaten into this tournament.
Yeah, you seldom need a escape rope boss combination. There's not many decks that's a worry, and I mean, Gudra's one of them, but you wouldn't be planning for Gudra going into a regional. So maybe this is the moment where you're thinking, I wish I put an escape rope in there. There's also the jet energy counts are so key in both lists to try and increase the amount of flower selectings possible. So That's 3 in the lost zone, one of them being a Gudra now.
Yeah,
so
that Gudra or the Metal Energy that was being saved. Very interesting decision. Does still have access to that Zamazenta or in his hand. There's the Lost Vacuum. Doesn't want to give Artisan as an option, I'm sure, to Alberto. But this also allows now Cramorant to be an active attacker. Start taking prizes as soon as possible, just initiating the pressure on this Comfey.
Yeah, as we said, Gudra probably the deck that wants to start racing ahead if possible. So the Zamazenta is going to be a key retaliate knockout later on, as there's only a 2-2 Gudra line. So that one Gudra going to the lost zone means there's only access to 1 in total, which is, of course, for Giratina, the dream situation, because you only need to star Requiem, you don't need to worry about any kind of shenanigans.
So we do head over to Alberto. Colress's Experiment, 5 cards into the hand. There's 1 V-Star. Does remember have 1 already prized as well. Does Sableye also seemingly a very important card for this kind of matchup. Interesting to see what decision Alberto takes here. The Nest Ball, another option to Finn through the deck. Colress's Experiment seems like an easy choice.
Yeah, this is the turns where it matters the most. This is where you can start reaching for 7, for 10 in the lost zone. Do you really force the lost count as high as possible? Do you take it slower? I wouldn't be surprised if this turn ends with an Abyss Seeking to really try and get to the Sableye range as soon as possible. But, you know, not many good Sableye targets on Hermione's side. Only that Comfey. Outside of that, everything's a little bit too bulky for a Sableye. So ideally, at this stage, maybe a Shred might even be a good option.
Yeah, definitely. I guess the one thing you might want to try not to do is activate the Zamazenta's attack.
True.
Of course, requiring a KO to happen. As we do see the Jet Energy on the Giratina V here. Currently on 5, and Abyss Seeking will push Alberto into the 7 range. Also, reason why it's actually not a terrible play, whilst you're also boosting your lost zone, you're starting to potentially activate that Roxanne as soon as possible as well.
Yeah, activate the Roxanne, thin out your deck to protect yourself from disruption. Yeah, the advantage of Giratina is if you want to take it slower and just get through that deck as soon as possible, you can.
As we do see 1 flavor of every energy now on Alberto's board in some way, shape or form. But just back over to Hermione, has the initiative with 1 prize taken.
Also that water in the lost zone will put a signal out that Greninja is a possibility. Some Giratina lists not playing any water. We have seen some lists with just 1 or 2, where it's sort of, if you see it in the lost zone, it doesn't matter anymore. But there is 3 here for Alberto, which means that he will be able to still use a Greninja and has signaled that it's a possibility.
It's a gust into the Comfey with the boss, and just a very quick announcement of split instantly here from Hermione. Now going down to 4 prizes remaining. Puts himself in a pretty good spot because you're trying to maybe navigate around those Roxanne plays as well. So identified early here by Hermione. Alberto will need to start trying to retaliate in some way, shape or form. Does have a couple of cards there that could be played. Sableye available.
Mirage Gates.
Colress's Experiment, as we already mentioned.
A lot of Psychic Energy in hand as well. So I think there's another 1 in deck, yeah, so that will be able to come with the Mirage Gate, and that'll be able to power up a Giratina, so maybe we'll see the sort of Shred approach, but then that activates that Zamazenta, which could retaliate.
Yeah, massive attacker. It's a kind of interesting spot Alberto finds himself in. Of course, a Colress's Experiment only pushes him up to 9, so it doesn't necessarily activate the Sableye as of yet either.
We'll see where these energies go. Multiple Mirage Gate in hand. We'll be able to do a few iterations, just checking the combinations that were needed to be able to get all the energy in play possible off this Mirage Gate. Psychic in hand can be attached to that active Giratina. I believe another Mirage Gate being played there, so that'll be a Psychic in the grass, 1 on the Sableye, 1 on the Tina. Psychic in hand will be possible for either of those Giratina. And I wonder at this stage whether the Sableye will be possible. I mean, there's a Colress in hand, maybe. I think the Mirage Gates are being done before the Colress just to thin them out.
Yeah, there is a Colress in hand. Was able to chain them with his last Colress's Experiment, as we do see it come down to the field now. Just waiting for the quick shuffle of the deck. trying to think about what Alberto could be looking for here. Here's the 5. Quick look at the hand.
Get any goodies in there? Well, the VIP pass, we know where that's going.
Yeah, one easy choice. The Comfey will allow Alberto to make it to the 10. Does have also the Jet Energy, which will allow it to attach to the Comfey to push it into the active and retreat into the Sableye.
Got to be worried about that Moonlight Shuriken though now, because as we mentioned, no Manaphy. That means 2 targets for the Moonlight Shuriken. This could be a quick 2 turns if a retaliate were to happen here, and then there'd be the Moonlight Shuriken available, but this would open up the Sableye, which could take away some options. I wonder where this Sprinkle is going to go.
Yeah, I mean, leaving the Cramorant in the active spot does mean he will just be facing another quick KO. However, again, as we kind of mentioned, 3 single prizes taken would mean the Roxanne is activated, and maybe that's the way that Alberto has to play this game. Just reducing the draw power that Hermione might have as well, that Comfey on the bench.
Almost baiting it in a way, saying, there's a Sableye, that's threatening, get rid of it.
Yep, easy choice there. 7 damage counters on the Comfey, 5 remaining to work with. Zamazenta looks like it's going to take a couple of damage counters at the very least. Kind of an awkward scenario. I think I like it on the Zamazenta. Yep, 5 there. 1 prize taken. Cramorant still in the active. Trying to limit what Hermione has access to, because he hasn't been able to play too many cards. Just been able to spit instantly with the boss in the previous turn.
There's always the challenge with the Cramorant in the active spot. It's a lot harder to continue the digging through the deck if they just ignore it, as we saw with the Abyss Seeking and now the Sableye playing around it. It's the dream situation for a lot of decks. That's why we saw Gardevoir do so well with Cresselia, just leaving that Cramorant in the active. It's not as threatening late game and mid game as it is in that early stages. 110 becoming less and less relevant.
Here we go, the 6th card now going into the Lost Zone from this Flower Select. Just as Hermione deliberates by looking at his hand as well, we see a Sableye come down into the Lost Zone. The other Comfey being super important here to try and hit into the 7. Quite a tough decision, but had to be done.
Yeah, that gets that Mirage Gate. There's 2 Mirage Gate in hand there, in fact. Both of them will be activated after another Comfey Flower Selecting. And there's Escape Rope as well. That will potentially send up the Comfey. Yeah, if you send up a Giratina, that just really worries you about the Zamazenta Retaliate, which really puts the clock onto Alberto.
Yeah, 100 damage plus 120 more if a Pokemon was knocked out on your opponent's last turn. So plenty of damage, enough to take a knockout on a Giratina V, and not something Alberto would want to give up. Again, playing this super well, trying to avoid that opportunity to lose a 2-prizer here, getting as much value out of something like Roxanne as soon as possible, I think is going to be like a key aspect of this game plan.
You saw that Zamazenta in the Lost Box list in Puria, in that single prize style Kyogre list. It's one of those cards, when it came out, everyone thought that's a good bit of damage from a single prize Pokemon, but it's just not found its way in many lists because the attack cost of 2 metal, 1 colorless is quite tricky to get in a lot of lists, but Goodra being one of the few lists that plays metal anyway, so it makes it quite easy. And you can see right here, the acceleration is starting.
The Mirage Gate coming down, the water attachment to the Greninja. Does Hermione have access to the additional water and attachments for the Greninja as an option to push himself to 2 remaining prizes, and then it's just a Giratina V or V-Star knockout?
I mean, which way round do you go? Do you go for... I mean, if you don't have a boss, you can't really go for the Giratina V. But, you know, in the ideal situation where you had a boss in hand and you could knock out a Giratina V right now, which could happen off this Pokegear, would you go for Giratina V or the 2 single prizes?
I think potentially going for the Giratina V puts himself in a better position. He obviously might not realize that there's no Manaphy on Alberto's side of the board.
True.
Both of these decks, you know, they're not playing a very high counts of boss anyway. Often you're trying to deal with the active, or with things like Sableye, you're kind of maneuvering around it. So just the 2 copies each. Does have the boss there, so it does open the option up. At the same time, Hermione does have 2 metals in the Lost Zone currently, and I think there's actually 1 in hand, because I believe that was the reason why Gudra was put in the Lost Zone a little bit earlier.
Potentially, yeah. There's just a Jet Energy in hand there, Super Rod. I don't know what's been discarded, so there was definitely a Psychic Energy, I remember, Water there. I don't know if there's the easy access to another Metal Energy. As you said, there's 2 in the Lost Zone there. There's 4 in the list, so there could be another one in deck. I mean, I can't remember what the prizes were exactly, but this is that turn. Do you go for the Greninja or do you go for the Zamazenta? Looks like he's going to go for the Zamazenta here with... Oh, maybe
Switching
not.
up, he has both.
Jet
he's
Energy.
Just trying to checkmate where possible.
Oh, he's keeping us on the edge of our seats here. Which way are they going to go?
I don't want to put too many words. One of the options, as you kind of mentioned, can take double KO on the Comfort and the Sableye, or could potentially utilize the Zamazenta to try and retaliate onto one of those Giratina Vs. I think I like the idea of taking the Giratina, which seems like the direction Hermione's going in, as there's the promotion of the Zamazenta into the active spot. The Gust from the boss's orders to the Giratina V that retaliate, dealing 220.
I guess at this stage, does he know there's no Manaphy in the other list? Because if that's the case, that's a very good decision. The other way around, it was trusting that you'd be able to get a boss and the energy acceleration, which is a lot harder. By leaving the Colress Experiment in the deck as well, by going this route, you got more options out of potential disruption. So now, let's see what that disruption can do.
So this scenario does mean Alberto has to deal with that Greninja in some way, shape, or form. Because the damage was not spread onto the Greninja, the Sableye is not able to deal with it. So it has to be a Gust boss's orders onto the Greninja, otherwise, without that Manaphy being available, the Greninja could come up, 1 energy, and take to the final 2 prizes for Hermione's side of the board.
So I guess looking back at that 5 damage that was all put on the Zamazenta, maybe a 1 on the Greninja could have been a good option for this future turn. But again, that's one of the challenges of Lost Box. You have to see so many turns ahead. And when you're unfamiliar with exactly the game plan, the routes they're going to take, you might not be able to see that that was the situation now. But a Gust plus Giratina knockout would be the only way, right?
Giratina V-Star knockout as well, because the Retaliate Zamazenta is still threatening, still on the board.
A lot to ask.
A lot to ask, as we do see already a Super Rod being played. It looks like, or maybe, yeah, being Super Rod being played for the energies.
There we go. And we mentioned how important it was the tempo came out from Gudra, and they've done that exactly that. I don't think they could play much faster in terms of taking prize cards at this stage. And it really is just down to whether the Giratina finds a disruption. 2 Roxanne, 2 Iono, 4 Path. They're leaning into that 3 prize taken turn. But at this stage, there is just 1 attack away from winning for Hermione on that Gudra list. The Greninja, a big threat at this stage. There's a lot to worry about. There's the V-Star, so there's no longer a retaliate option there. So it's now, what's the plan here? How are you getting rid of that Greninja?
It's a tricky one, because the Sableye's coming into the active spot. Path coming down, maybe just trying to limit the energy that Hermione needs to be able to use Moonlight Shuriken now, as the Path Roxanne does come down.
I mean, you've got 3 energy on the active Zamazenta, 2 on the Greninja. There's 3 in the Lost Zone. You know there's not many energy about, so you're just hoping that off this Roxanne, the energy isn't found.
Yeah. Big play here by Alberto. Be vital to have a little look at what we can see from Hermione's side. Does Hermione find an out here? Sableye will need to knock out the Zamazenta in the active spot. Here we go.
Roxanne, what do we see? I think there's an Artisan in there. So
Artisan switch cart, so does have a few draws available.
I mean, what's going to get knocked out here by the Sableye? That's the other question.
Zamazenta has to go. 8 there, knocking out Zamazenta. 4 remaining.
It's got to be 1 on the Greninja, right? At least, or, well, all 4.
One of the other things, I guess, yeah, it gets to the point where this Sableye is going to be knocked out. Looks like a Flower Select there. Oh, no, sorry, draw for turn. That was into a Battle VIP pass. Path has been bumped.
Still quite
Thin
a
out the
thick
deck. Just needs an energy from a Flower Select.
And look, scrolling through that deck there was not a huge amount of energy, and that Manaphy is going to be key to take away the Greninja option. Of course, we mentioned about the water energy. We have now can physically see 3 on board, so they know that that's an option. Not the easiest option at this stage, but still, they have to be concerned about that as an available out to knock out 2 Pokemon.
Yeah, Hermione, I saw 1 Psychic in the deck. I didn't know if there was any more, maybe 1 more Jet Energy or so. I don't think there was. No. Big Flower Select.
Colress, that's pretty big.
Does have the Switch Cut already in hand, so gets to dig further. 5 more to see.
I mean, a Super Rod would be nice earlier on in this dig, so you can start putting energy back in.
Does have
Mirage Gate.
The Mirage Gate, so
that's it.
I believe that would be it. With an Escape Rope as well. Mirage Gate double checking the energy. 1 Psychic available.
Just a switch out needed, and we see that switch cart. There it is.
And Alberto picks up.
Going into game 2.
Fantastic. I mean, before we had a chance to look at the list, of course, we only really spoke about the Giratina and the Goodra. Hermione didn't even put Goodra down. Went single prize route the whole way and was able to take game 1.
Yeah, a smart decision there. That Zamazenta really is a check for unevolved Vs. When they're at that 220 hit points range, you're always worried about taking a knockout because that Retaliate could come through, and we saw it perfectly done with the boss's orders. Set up that 1 prize, take out a 2 prizer, Greninja for game.
Yeah, Greninja, again, just showcasing just how good of a support Pokemon and attacker it is. You know, as a Radiant, only allowed to play 1 off in your deck, but it would be a bit overpowered if there was maybe multiple of those. But it's, again, Moonlight Shuriken, the way Alberto's built the deck, often you don't really need to use a Manaphy. You can manage your own resources and sort of board and bench, but he required that additional Comfey to come down to get to that 10, to activate that Sableye, and it just was a little bit awkward at that stage.
I mean, we speak about setting up a rigid board state before disruption, and just having that Greninja with the 2 water energy on it ready for that turn where the Roxanne came through, it meant there was so little that was needed to win the game. It was just a Mirage Gate, an energy if they found one, and a switch out, and the switch outs would also help with the dig. You know, there was Choruses still left in the deck, and even though it was quite a thick deck, it wasn't unlikely that we would see that end game scenario working out after the Roxanne, and because they were so far ahead, it didn't even have to be the next turn. It could be a few turns later on. Yeah,
I wonder if Hermione will be able to go down the same route again, the single prize, and using Zamazenta as you mentioned, just a bit of a checkpoint for those Giratina Vs. Alberto's, I mean, opening turn was I felt was pretty good. Double Comfey down, double Tina. I mean, double Comfey may be a little bit awkward. Again, as I kind of mentioned, with no Manaphy, sometimes you just want to be using 1 to begin with, as we do see the prizes. Zamazenta, massive in the prizes here. We saw how powerful it was in that game 1, but no access for Hermione, and Alberto's chosen to go second.
Yeah, get that first knockout. There's always a chance with Lost Box. And maybe it's not even the knockout, maybe it's just the Abyss Seeking to start getting that lost count as high as possible. And I wonder how vital that Zamazenta is to the game plan. Now Goodra is almost definitely needed, and it's not ideal in the matchup, as we mentioned before. Giratina is very good at getting through Goodra, one of the best Pokemon to get through Goodra when it's got that rolling iron up. So definitely going to have to start changing the game plan now that Zamazenta is not available.
Yeah, as Hermione just double checks what has been prized. We'll be just cursing a little bit, just that the Zamazenta is hidden away in those prizes. Doesn't play the Hisuian Heavy Ball, so no access to it as of yet. But go back to the original game plan. Let's see if those Goodras can get rolling.
You've also got to think, when you've got something like that prize that you don't put down straight away, it comes out in the middle of the game, you might think, I'll get a few knockouts early on, see if I get it off the prizes, and if I don't get it, then it's done. But if I do find it off that early prize, then you're in a really good spot still, because you don't need it early game, so who knows? We'll see what the plan is here for Hermione. They showed exactly how to do it in that first game, and now they've got to try and replicate it game 2, but Alberto will be happy to find out no Zamazenta's there.
Yeah, there'll be a stage where Alberto will just be looking over at the board. If a Goodra comes down, maybe he'll just kind of understand that maybe the Zamazenta isn't quite available. But, you know, these are the players in the game. They're in the zone. They're the ones who have to keep check of every little bit of information to give them that slight edge at every turn and every possibility.
Yeah, and the added draw of the Radiant Greninja, that's always a bonus. I mean, in the last game it was prize, so that took away a lot of the draw. We spoke about how hard it is when you start putting multiple Comfey down and the Sableye down as well. Radiant Greninja is a great option to keep drawing, which is safe from the opposition's Radiant Greninja. So a key part of this deck's game plan when it's not got a Manaphy to try and dig through that deck as fast as possible.
Yeah, conceal cards and then a flower selecting, giving a few different more options there. We'll have double Chorus's Experiment in hand. We'll be able to chain them back to back unless impacted by something like the Iono in Alberto's list. But of course, Alberto will be looking to try and do a similar thing. Super Rod, it's a massive card, often in the deck. Does hit the Lost Zone as well.
1 of 3 there.
1 of 3. Nothing to worry about then.
For anyone who's just waking up and tuning into the stream, welcome. We are in round 11. We've already played a game, had a lovely little Burnett versus Lost Box game. So if you missed that, definitely want to go back and watch. But for now, round 11, Alberto versus Hermione. We'll see if either of these can really increase their record, both on 8 wins, so in a great spot to try and make that top cut. At this stage, Alberto is chasing from behind as game 1, very in favor of Hermione with that tempo, getting to the win far quicker than maybe Alberto was expecting, and now an adaptation is required.
Yeah, Alberto just double checking what is prize on this side of the board. I don't think there was anything too crazy. Once again, this time in game 2, we'll have access to that Radiant Greninja. Couple of Mirage Gates. Nothing too mad to be worried about. Double checking and writing his prizes down as well. We've seen a lot of players on stream this weekend utilize that kind of notepad to remember the resources that are available. It's a very resource-intensive game nowadays. Are
you a notepadder?
I am a notepadder. I'm utilizing one of those little digital notepads similar to Alberto, just showcasing there.
I got 3 of them. That'll do.
sometimes even with the notepad, yeah, it's bad, but I do forget.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the hardest skills in the game is that first turn, well, the first deck checks. It's not always first turn, but the first deck check, you get a chance to find out exactly what those 6 prize cards are. I'm a bit of a fan of playing Hisuian Heavy Ball purely for the fact that sometimes you don't have to check your prizes. But then that's the difference between me and these kind of players. Alberto and Hermione really showing off the resource management in this tough matchup. So much to think about. Lost Zone, discard, all the resources that are available, and the optimal route to victory isn't always clear until the game unfolds.
Yeah, conceal cards into the Chorus Experiment from Alberto here. Interestingly, for Hermione, this is the first time he's seen the Radiant Greninja. We obviously would have expected it with the Water Energies in the deck, but now knowing that there's the threats potentially on Alberto's side of the board, Hermione will have to be thinking, well, I need to get that Manaphy down.
Yeah, Manaphy, so key in so many decks at the moment, because there's a lot of small Pokemon that Radiant Greninja can really prey upon, and it's kept a lot of people worried over the recent meta, and to the point where a lot of decks are putting Radiant Greninja in without any Water Energy, and people are still putting Manaphy down, scared at the prospect of what it's doing there. Water Energy was shown 3 in the list for Alberto, and so that Manaphy needs to come down ASAP for Hermione, otherwise that accelerated prize race could be in favor of Alberto.
That's Jet Energy, indicating that Alberto will not be using Abyss Seeking on this turn, but straight into that Flower Select was a great pickup of that Cramorant. Will be able to, again, from this side of the board this time, double again, this time be able to activate and initiate the prize race in Alberto's favor.
Yeah, we mentioned his list is built heavily around Disruption, 2 Iono, 2 Roxanne, 4 Path. Typically doesn't want to be the one going ahead, is happy to be behind, setting up early, going for those Abyss Seekings, get the Lost Zone count as high as possible. But knowing this start for Hermione wasn't particularly wide, there hasn't been any big threats put down, just trying to get that early tempo in and maybe get so far ahead that there's no chance for Hermione to come back.
Yeah, here comes the first Chorus Experiment. Looks like potentially Hermione could have had all 4 Chorus Experiment at one point in her hand. He now will be holding 3 if he takes both of those there. Already having 1 usually means at least one there will be Lost Zoned, but as a big indication
you say that,
Alberto.
I think he's taken them all.
Taking them all, that's impressive. And Iono could be quite deliberating for Alberto to potentially use and push them all the way to the bottom of the deck.
I mean, if he knew.
If he knew.
If he knew. I mean, I'm sure you guys in chat love watching these games and, and calling out the optimal plays. But you got to remember, for these guys on the feature table, there's a lot of pressure. Trying to work out exactly what the right option is so tough when all you can see is what's in front of you. And slightly unfamiliar territory, not for these guys, they've been there before. But for a lot of players, it does add an extra level of challenge to the game. You can see how comfortable both these guys are on the stage. They've been there before, they're experienced with it. And they are playing smoothly at the moment, keeping a nice steady pace and knowing exactly what they need to do.
Yep, Hermione now going ahead in the lost zone count. 5 there after that flower selecting. Does have the switch cart as well.
It's like a mini game, the lost zone count, isn't it? Who can get to 10 first? Right, now let's play the game.
As we do see the promotion to the Cramorant in the active spot. Energy attachment, just kind of saying, well, I'm going to start at least prepping this in the background if you're not able to deal with me. As there is a retaliation, spit innocently, cram on cram.
Get that, there we go, prize is up. So not the Zamazenta this time.
Not yet.
Not yet.
As Alberto has to consider what to promote. Comfey, an easy choice here. Does have Iono in hand, but ideally, and usually, you'd want to be chaining those Colress's experiment first.
There's also a Colress in hand. I've done that a few times, and you've got no Colress. You think, well, the best thing I can do is an Iono. On this occasion, that would accidentally be brilliant. And wanting to opt for that Colress to get that lost zone count as high as possible. As we mentioned before, no lost vacuum, which can sometimes be a way to get around needing that Colress. So has to rely heavily on Colress and flower selectings, as well as that Abyss seeking to start racing ahead in the lost count. It's what, 5 now, make that 6 with this. So Mirage Gate should be online this turn. And then it's what route to victory is taken by Alberto. Will there be an option for a Radiant Greninja? There's not 2 easy targets, but it will start getting a lot of damage on the board.
If it does try and go for the Radiant Greninja, you could take out the Comfey on the bench, maybe put some damage on the board, ready for some Sableye action. A turn or 2 later, you know, we've already saw how vital it is maybe to get some damage on that Radiant Greninja in game 1. An option there is to put something like the 90 damage on it as well. If there are any more further smaller HP Pokemon, just means there's a little bit of easier targets for that Sableye. But Alberto here going for that Cramorant once again.
Okay, so the Cramorants are available there. It's now just lean into Disruption or lean into the lost count, because you can't Mirage Gate this turn if you Iono, most likely. But you can Mirage Gate if you Colress, but there's no Disruption then. And it's just how important is that Disruption? I guess the Cramorant coming to the active, that might mean the Iono's coming down. And as we mentioned, the Disruption package in Alberto's list is such a fundamental part of it. So early Ionos against Lost Box could be very effective.
Yeah, he's gone for it. We'll be putting those Colress experiments to the bottom of the deck.
How big's that hand?
Yeah, exactly. And maybe that's why Alberto's sort of considering this as the right play. You know, drawing up to 5 at the top of the deck, maybe forcing Hermione into an awkward spot rather than having so many cards available to him. Path in play, so can't use Radiant Greninja to draw more. And has an attacker in the active spot.
I mean, how many decks have we seen beat Lost Box just by Ionoing early, even if it's for 5 or 6, with a path to the peak, and it just takes away options. You know, those cards that you're holding for when you hit that big marker, like the Mirage Gates or the Choruses, they just disappear, because you can only play them at a certain point. So if you Iono, you typically get rid of all those useful cards they've been holding on to, because you've got to think every single flower selecting, they're choosing the better card that they want. So by Ioning it away, you're giving them a hand of unselected cards that they don't want, and all those good ones go straight onto the bottom.
Yeah, a number of options available here. Hermione's hand were quite a few playable cards, other than that Gudra V-Star, I believe I saw. Artisan coming down, bumping the path to the peak, getting another Comfey down as well. Begin resetting that board once again. Offers the opportunity for a Moonlight Shuriken at some stage. will be thinking, I might need to get this Manaphy down again. It's always in the back of your mind when you're looking at a Radiant Greninja.
100%. And, you know, we spoke about the speed of getting to the lost zone. I'm really impressed by Alberto's list. It's unique. For a long time, people were saying Lost Giratina is sort of a very similar list no matter who plays it. And over this regional, we've seen the cross-switcher build, and then now here a much more disruption-focused build. And I think people are starting to try and push away from that very safe, typical list of Lost Tina and find their own way that catches people off guard, as they're not going to expect as many of the Ionos and Roxannes here. They wouldn't expect the cross-switchers in that build. So some creative deck building, I think, is what has pushed Lost Tina into that higher conversion rate into day 2.
Yep, no, I completely agree with that, as Hermione just hits the 7 in the Lost Zone now activating those Mirage Gates on his side of the board. Opportunity here to potentially take 2 prizes, but again, would force himself into Roxanne range, so not ideal. As we do see an Ultra Ball being readied, it looks like. Just kind of double checking as well. Remember, you very correctly highlighted multiple Super Rods. So it looks like that Sableye hits the discard for the time being, at least.
Can always get it back.
Exactly.
The discard pile is like a second backup plan, isn't it, in Lost Box?
Especially combined with Artisan. Super Rodding it back to deck and then getting it straight onto the field is and has always been a bit of an option here. We do see the Manaphy come down from that Ultra Ball, so correctly targeting and defending the board state from that threat of Radiant Greninja on Alberto's side. The Mirage Gate there, getting a water and a metal energy attachment to the active Comfey to give it a pivot option.
Hermione last game did so well to set up the board state for the future, so that energy on the Comfey, I don't think it's even going to be used to retreat, because I think a Jet Energy is going to be required here to get the Greninja into the active spot. But that's one of those little tricks you see good Lost Box players do. Put an energy in advance onto your Comfey so that when you do get disrupted, you've got it as a backup, easy retreat next turn. And you can see exactly that Comfey now on the bench, ready for the future.
Yeah, really fantastic sequencing there. Jet Energy really sort of enabling a lot of pivot around the different Lost Box variants. As we do see the first target onto the Comfey and the 90, it looks like just kind of targeting multiple things here. Again, doesn't want to push himself into Roxanne range.
Yeah, if you take out the other Comfey, then Roxanne's available. If you put it on the Giratina, you might be able to retaliate into it, but you need to get it off the prizes still. So tough decision here. It might seem obvious to many to just put it onto the Comfey, but smarter player Hermione recognizes the disruption was so key last game and wants to avoid that 3-prize turn.
Doing exactly as what we thought Alberto may consider to Hermione's side of the board, putting that 90 damage on the Radiant Greninja, getting it ready for something like the Sableye on a latter turn. Alberto still with that Cramorant in the active spot. Roxanne still an unplayable card. Artisan being used here. Chance to shuffle back the deck after putting his cards to the bottom from that Iono.
Is that going to be a no target there? You know, got to be careful. If you put a Sableye or a Comfey down, that then makes another dual target with the Comfey, so you'll be putting yourself in a really risky spot. So this is the nuance of these kinds of matchups. You're always thinking defensively as well as offensively. You've got to think, what can I do to take away options from them with what I put on the board? And it seems like at this stage, that Lost Zone count will go above the Mirage Gate line of 7. And outside of that, we'll see what comes out of this Chorus experiment. It looks like a nice, easy decision there.
Yeah, the Nest Ball and a Battle VIP pass going straight to the Lost Zone, pushing Alberto up to the 8. Mirage Gate now activated.
Okay, what's the plan here?
I wonder if it's something that Alberto is considering necessarily dealing with that Greninja in the active spot. Water Energy being attached to the Giratina. V-Star and energy to the Cramorant as a pivot option again.
I was going to say, where are the Grass Energy? There's 2 in hand, 1 in the Lost Zone, so not able to get them off the Mirage Gate, so that's why the Water Energy went onto the Giratina there. But another Water and Psychic combo. Let's see Okay, just again, setting up that rigid board state. The Mirage Gate sprinkle in the mid-game just to set up as many attackers as possible. And you can see at this stage, both Tinas ready to just have an attachment of a Grass Energy, and they'll be good to attack.
Mirroring that game 1 where it was a Psychic Energies in hand. Now it's the Grass attachment from hand to the active V-Star. Lost Impact available. Will push Alberto up to the 10 count as well.
Okay, might go Star Requiem to conserve energy. We'll see. Oh.
No, not possible yet.
Oh, yes, of course, not a 10
This will push him into the 10.
There we go.
It's not ideal, a bit inefficient as an attacker in that sort of shape.
Water gone as well.
Yeah, exactly. So, with the Manaphy down, it's maybe something Alberto wouldn't really want to try and target too much here as well. Now just has 2 big, bulky Giratina V-Stars available. Zamazenta, of course, unable to now retaliate into it. Without just essentially being large chip damage.
220 is still a good number onto a Giratina V-Star, can set up some sprinkles and Greninja plays. But as you mentioned, yeah, the water gone, that takes away one scary option from Alberto, and that Manaphy really deterred it. So that just shows you that kind of standoff, the Manaphy versus the Greninja. Very clearly taking away Radiant Greninja's options, and also because it's so low on hit points, you also got to be worried about that being the next knockout as well. Yeah,
as we do see the Artisan being used to grab that Sableye onto the board. Maybe a little bit of a sign that Zamazenta's not available, but at the same time, not quite necessary, when right now you might just want to target down some of those easier, lower HP Pokemon right now, just to get as much maximum value as possible.
Oh, that's a tough one. Super Rod was lost zoned early in this game, so when you see another one, you almost have to take it, because ideally you want to have 2 per game. That's why people play the 3 to try and have that easier decision earlier on.
Hasn't yet hit the magical 10 in the lost zone either. So just after that 7 from the previous turn, the 2 flower selections hitting up to 9.
Those poor Colruses that were chucked at the bottom from Iono. Where are they?
Has been shuffled around a few times, but just not quite into the top few cards after flower selections yet.
That's why they took all 3 of them, I think, just to make sure there was as many in the deck. But, you know, still not finding their way through. I mean, both of these decks don't motor through as fast as some of the other Lost Zone decks. Can mean that you have a thicker deck towards the end, and that's why Disruption works so well against them. But at this stage, the slower game plan from both of them, just taking a prize each turn, might allow them to thin that deck a little bit more, set themselves up for an end game where they're a little bit more protected.
Super Rod Nest Ball brings back Greninja. There's a Poker Gears, that one way of reaching to that Colress's experiment. There it is, number 2 there, number 3.
And a Roxanne as well.
Roxanne is an option, but wants to activate his Sableye Lost Mine as soon as possible. Great pickup there from that Radiant Greninja.
You know, the ideal Roxanne is when you've just been Roxanned. So perhaps he's leaving the Roxanne in there to get the counter Roxanne. Did I say Roxanne enough there?
We have to emphasize how important that card is, that's why. As we do see...
There it is.
See 5 cards in hand there. The final Super Rod left. Goodra once again looking like it's going to be hitting that Lost Zone. Sticking to the single prize route in the hope of victory in game 2.
Those prizes are so important at this stage, because that Zamazenta, we know where it is in the prizes, so we can see the kind of time frame that will come out if the players draw from bottom, as is typical.
Just to pass.
Just to pass, because the attached energy from last turn was used to retreat, so needed a switch out off of that Colress.
So Alberto there having the initiative, or being given the initiative here. What could Alberto do in this scenario? Does have Sableye in hand. Just uses Star Requiem. Again, not the most efficient, but when you're just wanting to take prizes, massive here. Down to 2 prizes left by Alberto. Hermione still requiring 4 more.
Just tempo. That's what it's been in both games. Tempo for Gudra in game 1, tempo for Alberto here with that Giratina. If you keep taking prizes and don't get disrupted, you're often finding your route to victory fairly comfortably. At this stage, there needs to be an accelerated prize mapping for Hermione. Needs to start taking 2 prizes in 1 turn to get back in the game.
Big Roxanne. Alberto has 2 attackers on board, but not enough energy on both of them to be able to start swinging away. Alberto, in theory, just needs to announce 2 attacks to be able to take game 2 and keep himself unbeaten. Because as it currently stands, if you're just joining us now, Hermione did win game 1 in this round 11 feature match.
Yeah, those 2 cards from Roxanne have been favorable a lot of the time in the stream so far. Will it be the case here? Or will Alberto struggle for a turn and not be able to attack? 2 Sableyes on board, both of them going to be able to chain attack. So even if Athena does get an attack off, we'll see multiple Sableye attacking. No Sableye set up for Alberto. So now we are seeing the prep damage. Multiple prizes taken. Zamazenta off the prizes.
No draw power, but there's a Chorus's Experiment in hand as well.
Okay, so a little bit of dig.
Are there any energies left?
There's 1.
Looks like 2 in the discard. Or was that 1 in the discard? 2, 3, 4 currently in the lost zone.
Yeah, not ideal.
Mirage Gate, massive. Water energy available.
Go.
1 jet energy, a couple of jet energies it looks like it's available.
But then as soon as you get that attack off, what do you do afterwards? You've got to start thinking about the energies that are in the lost zone then. You're going to be sitting with Giratina V-Stars not powered up.
If you can keep the jet's energies in the deck after the lost impact, of course, removing the energies from the active, activating the jet energy will be one way to just maneuver back into another attacker. That's surely got to be something Alberto's considering. Not much time left on the clock. 2 attacks required.
Okay, the Artisan just there checking whether the Sableye was a good option, but of course Sableye, such low hit points that it would increase the speed that Hermione can finish this game off. I think there's a lot of concerns at this stage around having anything other than the Cramorant as a single prize on the bench. 2 prizes required for Hermione. At this stage, they have to go through a Cramorant and a Giratina, or just a Giratina alone.
Big pickup from the Chorus's Experiment. Jet energy in hand now as well, alongside the switch cut if the Cramorant does get brought active, which doesn't really seem like the most optimal play. So keeps the switch cut there as an option. Jet energy hasn't attached from hand yet.
Oh, Jet Energy, the Cram. If the Cram gets knocked out, there's nothing to worry about. 1 prize won't do it. Take out that Sableye, and all you have to do then to finish is Giratina V-Star.
Yeah, sorry, my bad. I did call it and then double check myself. I'm just second guessing now. Every little turn so important for Alberto. 1 more attack to take game 2.
So this is to get that draw for Alberto. We're running out of time. It's probably going to finish with this game, or can Hermione at the end of this find a route to victory? I think that's going to be it. They're going to be scooping up, and I don't think we have enough time for another game, so that's going to be Alberto getting game 2, 1-1, 2 players on an 8 record, getting that draw, still in with a chance of making the top 8, but at this stage making it a little bit tougher for themselves.
Yeah, Alberto showcasing why Lost Tina has been such a powerful deck since the turn of Worlds into this format. Things still needing to adapt within it, now becoming more of a disruption package deck than a lot of others that we would have considered like Mew DTE or Arc Path. Has more path than most of those decks we've seen.
Yeah, I really like what Alberto's doing with that list there, but shout out to Hermione coming in with Gudra. Not many people thinking that card is still an option. I think a lot of people have probably put it right at the bottom of their playable cards, because realistically, it doesn't do well into a 1-hit KO meta where things can take it out. You know, we've got a lot of decks. You know, Shen Pao can reach that knockout, which typically is not an ideal situation when you're a Gudra. You're hoping to wall for lots of turns and heal it off. You know, we've got the Giratina V-Star. So it's not found itself in the meta very well, but we've seen 2 players navigating it beautifully. And a lot of the time, it's not just the Giratina V-Star, it's the package you play around it. And that Retaliate Zamazenta being prized in game 2 really affected the game plan.
Yeah, I mean, we've said at the start, before this match had even begun, the Lost Zone variants kind of truly dominating the current meta in Lille right now in a load of different flavors. We saw Tina, we've seen Gudra, we've seen, you know, Charizard, and the typical turbo variants.
And Kyogre. I mean, the list goes on.
Exactly, and it just enables so many different packages to be able to be played, and it's just showcased here by two fantastic players, pushing themselves a little bit closer. You know, not ideal in either minds, but, you know,